Hey everybody, this is Munson Steed, and of course we are on Rolling Out with the powerful sisters with superpowers, but we're talking about something special. I love curators of beautiful Black content, and I've got my dear sister Anita. Can you describe for our community what it is to be a curator and where you're curating and why this is really a special moment in Black history?
Yes, so I'm Dr. Anita Bateman. I am the Associate Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art at Museums of Fine Arts Houston. I've been curating for about 10 years now, and I specifically focus on art of the African diaspora and specifically African-American artists, contemporary African-American artists. And so to be a curator really means to steward collections at museums if you are affiliated with an institution, or if you're independent, it means to be sort of a connoisseur of visual art, a friend and listening ear to artists, and someone who really is in support of exhibition making and institution building. And so what I do in my day-to-day really consists of, talking to people about, contemporary African-American art and contemporary African diasporic art, engaging with the public in order for them to really challenge themselves on subject matter and sort of discussing, with artists, their career goals, contextualizing their work for visitors and audiences, and really thinking through sort of the long-term reverberations, I guess you would say, of contemporary art in today's moment and beyond today's moment.
So you and I are talking about a really special exhibit. Where is it happening? Why is it happening? And how has it affected you?
Yes, so my first exhibition at the MFAH is the Obama Portraits, as we know, is on its national tour. Houston was at first the last city on the national tour, but has since shifted to being the 5th city on the tour, with the inclusion of now the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco and the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. And so in each presentation of the Obama Portraits, there's sort of an organizing curator, a different iteration that draws attention to key aspects related to the portraits and their commission, the commission process in which they were sort of fabricated. And so for the MFAH presentation, it was important for people to really engage with the portraits programmatically, because we are only focusing on the portraits. Other institutions sort of have done either auxiliary exhibitions or, have also done a really robust set of programming. But for us, our opening celebration Sunday Best happened a few days ago on the 3rd. And that was really to sort of introduce the portraits to the city, introduce me to the city, as well as get people, out to the museum to really speak with artists and engage in the different activations that were around our campus.
Well, for those that don't know, why don't we share with them what those initials stand for? MFAH.
Museum of Fine Arts Houston.
And it could have been culturally, Friday's best, but you chose Sunday. Why was Sunday and just the very community feeling that you brought to the experience, so that when it does reverberate with the audience and in the city, how did you put that culmination and curate just that experience, which is so dynamic?
Yeah, thank you. It was a team effort. It began at the conversation in October with both, myself and our marketing departments. Shout out to MJ Mahogany Johnson, who was sort of a think partner with me on this. And so we're both coming from Southern Black backgrounds, thinking about what it is to really envision a day in which people could come to the museum, dress up, be in fellowship and communion with each other, and also think about the visual culture aspects of what these portraits mean to, the Black demographic in the city, as well as, the populist sort of demographic who have come out for the tour. And so having a set program in which we were celebrating Blackness, and specifically thinking about how to draw people into the museum, and what, we've received, feedback about wanting, audiences, what they want to see in the museum was really important for making these activations, making community partnerships with our third ward sort of artists and businesses who really wanted that support and love. And, the museum had the space to do it and to give them that. So having everyone sort of congregate in this celebratory moment for the Obama portraits was really important.
I love that, but and when we're all thinking as a community, think partners are important, but also your community collaborators. You guys brought a real sense of community collaboration in the thoughtfulness that you applied. How?
Yeah, I actually have a question for you, since I know you're based in Atlanta and the High Museum had a presentation of Sunday Best. So just wondering how you guys found out about it, and how did it sort of compare to what happened at the High? I would be interested to know.
I am actually based in Chicago, and today I'm based in Detroit, and so rolling out's pretty national. Um, the I've got friends who are artists, and obviously the I think the approach there was kind of ancillary in Atlanta, as they built in other parts of their collection at the High, so that they kind of had a runway into it, and they had protest and kind of conversation leading up to it. But one of the things that we've made sure we're doing at Rolling Out is as a cultural voice to make sure that, one, we're elevating our thoughtfulness and intentionality about cultural moments. So for us, the conversation that you and I are having, we know the programming in Atlanta was great, but I think we know that just programming our community to celebrate our artists and our curators like yourself, so that the context of going to a museum becomes a normal thing for our children. Context becomes a normal father-daughter walk as you walk in there. And I know there were fathers and daughters because we actually took imagery from that. The other thing is, with other traveling exhibits, we just kind of follow the road as it leads toward a business method is as that clearly we want them to advertise, which they did. But at the same time, it's really those professionals that look like you that we also want to bring to market, so that as a young sister or a young brother who has a love for art can see that there's a profession that literally says how you think about art, how you think about, you don't have to just be an events person for a party. You literally can structure a, thought partnership idea for a career. And that's why it's so important to be able to talk to someone like you, because you give us insight to the profession of being a curator, on top of the lovely swash of information you give us, an insight about art.
Great. Well, that was indeed an answer, so I appreciate it.
So here it is. So take apart, if you will, from your vantage point as a curator, you have the first lady, and you have to position her inside a experience. What was that for you like, knowing how revered she is in our community, beloved, and knowing that another sister, just like you, young, Black, intelligent. I mean, the fact that y'all are beautiful is kind of secondary to the fact that y'all are all studied, ready, prepared to execute your superpowers. But what was it like really to say, you know what, I did this for the first lady of our nation, the Black nation?
Yeah, it was a monumental moment during install, because not only are the portraits larger than life, people don't realize they're 6 and 7, feet tall, so they're really large. But also, it was the first time I had seen them in person. I know that they've been in other institutions, but of course, travel was restricted. I wasn't able to see them in other institutions. And so it was sort of a moment in which I was holding my breath to make sure everything would go correctly. But we have a fabulous prep team. And seeing, Mrs. Obama in person and knowing the stature in the esteem in which she has in our community was really almost overwhelming, because there was a sense of not wanting to get too close to the portrait, even though it's a likeness, and also wanting, to contextualize it, as you say, in a way that pays respect to her legacy, not only as a political thinker, but as someone who's a cultural icon, And Michelle and Barack themselves, the former president and first lady, are art connoisseurs. They dabble, dabble, if you would like to say, in modern contemporary art. They redecorated the White House to their taste in order to support contemporary and modernist artists. And so it was important that in a museum setting, people would understand that these figures are almost really where they're supposed to be. In a large gallery, also contextualized by didactics, thinking about the collection as a whole, what it means to have them, just really sort of their presence gracing us in the museum was really important. And I think to dignify that with the presentation that we have, is fitting for them. So.
I love that. The artist, and I think the conversation I often have is one of sameness. I think our community expected the portrait of the president to be the exact same style, color, tone as what. Can you help us as we approach art so that we're not looking for cookie cutter expressions of creativity, and describe how you interpret the young sister, and I don't forget her name, and I apologize for that, who actually painted, if we'll start with the Mrs. Obama's image?
Yes, so Amy Sherrill, who is the artist who painted Mrs. Obama's portrait, and Kehinde Wiley, who painted President Barack Obama's portrait, did not converse during this process in terms of knowing what the other would be doing in its final sort of, reveal. And so not only were they seemingly surprised at what the other sort of did at the unveiling in 2018, but it was also the first time the president and the first lady saw their own likenesses. So on the stage where we're seeing that image of everyone sort of looking at each other and being pleased at the final result, it's really a moment that it touches upon the artistic process, and that being a 2-year sort of finalization of what was started in 2016. And so with Cheryl, she stated in interviews that she really felt a kinship with Mrs. Obama from the very beginning. And so there was a list that was presented to the First Lady and the President of about 15 artists from which they could choose who they would like to interview to do their portraits. And, Amy Sherrill and Kehinde Wiley were interviewed by the President and the former First Lady. And the story goes that Amy Sherrill really said something akin to, "Oh, President Barack, I respect you so much, but Mrs. Obama," and she sort of literally turned her body to Mrs. Obama, "I really would love to make your likeness," right? And so not only was there sort of a fangirl moment between the artist and the First Lady, but Amy Sherrill, knowing her own mind and having a practice very, sort of cemented in showing the Black figure as something of, racial complexity, and thinking about sort of humanizing and monumentalizing figures that she finds in neighborhoods, really could see that there was that relatability aspect that she wanted to portray with Mrs. Obama's likeness.
And the president's stance, pose, counter to traditional Teddy Roosevelt.
So Kehinde Wiley, as people may know, is someone who really interrogates masculinity and power, or he became sort of well known in the public eye for his portraits of men, and then later sort of introduces, women into, his practice in terms of portraying them. But again, that was something Mr. Obama or President Obama, you have to address him in certain ways versus when you're speaking versus when you're writing. And so but former President Obama was drawn to that aspect of Kehende's practice, his interrogation of power, his challenging the viewer to think about what it means to be in a position of authority, thinking also about, the queer political body or queer and political bodies, aristocratic bodies in the 19th century and these sort of monumental historic paintings. All translate into, his practice. And so when, Mr. Obama is sort of seated, really composed and relaxed, but there's something about, his hands being really larger than life and sort of almost rested in his lap, but at any moment, it looks like he can move. So that sort of spontaneity and quick thinking that a president must embody is sort of really subtle in that portrait. And it's a lovely portrait both are lovely portraits because they're really personalized to each of their personalities, right? So the symbolism of the flowers have to do with President Obama's political and personal trajectory, his childhood in Hawaii, his political organizing in Chicago, thinking about the heritage of his Kenyan father. All of that is represented and is literally the backdrop, the context in which we come to the portrait. So.
Take us through, if you would, just a little bit of what you see in Amy's work, because I think it's far too often misunderstood. Brother Wiley is kind of already kind of hip hop love and affection and male complexity. So his voice was very bold and big before he got to this portrait of our president. Amy, not so much well known. And I think to the community, our lens needs to focus on a few other aspects of beauty that I've had to share with friends. Like, if she would have put him in the same green, it wouldn't have been the same. If she wouldn't have made her feminine in the beauty and the love that she gave back to the community, you wouldn't be able to receive that. And I really felt like it was an island trip in terms of color and love, and that she allowed the pastels to kind of not be the traditional darknesses and hues that people apply with portrait, which is to lighten us up and to be in moments of joy. But that was my interpretation.
Yeah, so Amy Sherald is really drawing on art historical references. As you'll see in the portrait, Mrs. Obama is wearing a Millie Design dress, which is an American design house that was sort of fabricated for her for the portrait by Michelle Smith, who designed the dress. But you see these very geometric patterns that are intentionally referring to the Gee's Bend quilts, Gee's Bend being a location in Alabama known for, these beautiful piecemeal quilts made from different fabric with personal meaning. That are fabricated from the descendants of the enslaved there. And so these are primarily a group of women who are working in this way that is, ancestral and beautiful and, pays homage to Southern quilt making traditions as well as African textiles. And so all of that is seen in Michelle Obama's dress, as well as Amy Sherald's really looking at Piet Mondrian, who's a modernist sort of abstract painter who was really interested in the form. And so all of those sort of art historical references congeal in this one sort of key aspect of the painting. And not only is, the dress really flowing, but it sort of leads you up to her face, Mrs. Obama's face. So there's this triangulation akin to what you see in Madonna and Child portraiture from, the Renaissance and the medieval sort of times, so that it's all really intentionally art historically important, right? And of course, there's no baby with Michelle Obama. There's no Jesus figure, but you get this sense of her regality, of her sort of almost sainthood, if you will. And I know that's a strong sort of suggestion, but with the celestial background, the really lightness of the blue, and how sort of ethereal she looks in space, it sort of makes you think of all of those art historical traditions that have to, do with really revering a figure within a portrait. Not only that, Amy Sherald is someone who is very well versed in thinking about sociological concepts of race. And so she's looking at W.E.B. Du Bois's 19th or early 20th century photographs at the Paris Exposition. And so in this sort of bevy of photographic history, you see early Black figures who are, post-Reconstruction, really disrupting racial stereotypes of the day because they're in their Sunday best, if you will. They're really what we would call now respectable. And they're showing a foreign audience primarily, as well as a US audience, that the racial stereotypes about Black Americans at the time simply weren't true. Our lives were vastly different than how they were portraying our lives to be. And that's seen in how Amy Sherald is using grayscale in terms of the tone of the skin of her portraits and the tone that you see with Mrs. Obama's portrait specifically.
Thank you for that, because I didn't want our community to think that the thoughtfulness and the care and concern by another Black woman hadn't been taken to the nth degree, to be inclusive, to be revered, to be respectful, and for us to stop wanting canned images of ourselves, even when we go into look at art. And, clearly I think of Kerry James Marshall and how he probably has 2 million colors of just Black. It's Black, but it's Black sunshine, and he makes the sunshine appear in Black. So I thank you for that, because I wanted us to go into, and as we look at these, to have some context, given it is often absent and we don't have a dynamic person like you to take us on a journey and tell us why and how this comes together. For you, if you would, how do you feel now that you've spoken to friends and you opened it up to the public to now have a walk and experience what you spent so many hours preparing for them to have?
Yeah, it's still pretty surreal. I mean, we opened 4 days ago, and people are seeing the show. They're loving the show. They love the portraits. They love, the presidential couple or the former presidential couple. And it feels almost like, it's a welcoming space. I would hope that people feel welcome in the galleries, that they were welcomed, at Sunday Best. And it's just been an outpouring of love from Houstonians everywhere, not even in the city, but people who were born in Houston saying, I love this for the city. I love this for the museum. And I can't imagine a better, commemoration for the portraits themselves than what I've been seeing these past 4 days from just, people who have told me, I've really never wanted to come to a museum until now, or I feel like, I'm represented in the gallery space. So now it's just, keeping the monumental, that's a matter of, what we'll do next and how they can really feel invigorated by being in the space, even beyond the portraits, after they leave us.
Cool. Lastly, when you think about the body of work that you're putting together in your mind, of how you'll close out your time with this, what is it like when you walk in and you journal after having had this experience? What are you saying to yourself? Not to tell us every word, but just as you're capturing your own history of what this moment and what these experiences. Are you journaling? Are you capturing? Or how are you entombing? Because your words are going to be important for us longer than these portraits will hang.
Yeah, so that's a great question in terms of thinking about how to intuit the moment and carry forward things that I've learned in this process with these portraits, and thinking about public engagement aspects, what that would look like for other shows. For me, I don't journal, at least as it relates to my art professional life. If I have a thought related to something that is affecting me personally, I don't really write it down. I'm more of a think about it and then release it sort of person. So I don't try to mull, over things too long as it relates to what I'm feeling in the moment. That's neither here nor there. But I think there's something to be said of wanting to really remember the feeling of the portraits and remember the process in which they got to Houston and how I got to Houston, right? So, repeating mantras that, I'm worthy to be here. The portraits are, just the beginning. Sunday Best is just the beginning, and thinking about the longevity of, the impact that they've had, as well as what I would like to do in the community, what I would like to do at the museum is something that I'm reflecting on now. And it's a journey. I just have to say that. I've been here 5 months and this is the first thing. And I don't know what exactly, the museum will hold for me, but I'm steadfast in my commitment to African diasporic artists. I am committed to, really supporting community members and meeting as many people as I can safely with the pandemic. And thinking about how to make the museum a more accommodating place for all people, because that is our mantra and our mission statement. So,
well, thank you for that. And last, as we're at our time, if you were whispering in the little girl who grew up wherever you grew up and you were walking in that museum, what would you whisper in her ear when she goes to see Mrs. Obama's portrait that nobody whispered in your ear, for those who were bringing their daughters to go and see the first lady ever to be in the White House?
Oh, that's another good question. So I was born and raised in Memphis. I did not grow up going to museums. So I would whisper to myself, you belong here, take up space here, like Mrs. Obama is taking up space.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, our favorite doctor, Anita Bateman. Congratulations. Thank you so much for all your gifts and inviting us to sacred and beautiful spaces to curate our voices and our expression and creativity for all.
Thank
Peace.
you.
I'm Munson Steve here on Rolling Out, and of course, Sisters with Superpowers, and that is Dr. Anita Bateman today with the Mr. and Mrs. presidential portraits of the First Lady and our President, number 44, y'all, President Barack Obama. Thank you so much. Peace.
Thank you. Peace.